first Sunday of the Great Lent, the Church brings forth to us a very important feast situation that is vital to our understanding of the providence of salvation. So much so that this particular Sunday is called the Sunday of Orthodoxy. You can think of it as the period or the day when the stamp of the Church was once and for all enacted, so that we know where the truth is and why. During this particular Sunday, we commemorate the time when the iconoclastic movements were put to rest. Iconoclasm being the clasm of icons, the destruction of icons, which some people got into their head were idols, and they decided to trash any image of Christ or his mother or the saints. Obviously a totally misunderstanding of why Christ came and was incarnate. And so they were reconciled and re-established on this particular day, as we just read in the Synaxarian reading. The feast day, where there is especially a bishop present, the parish would get together after the liturgy for a rather long service. It's called the anathema service. It's a bit like Vespers on steroids. It goes for quite a while. And during this period, the readers and the priests recite the prayers about all those things, both from the past and right to our day to day, which are anathema, that is, which are separated from our understanding as being incorrect and wrong, and which will lead us down the wrong path. Anathema comes from a Greek word. Those from the past we know as those regular heresies that pop up. Heresies about, in fact, a lot of them are bound up with a misunderstanding of who Christ is. But at the same time, there are heresies popping up almost every day from various sources, not just orthodoxy, but they influence people who are lacking in this sort of theological knowledge and get them to implement in their life wrong things. We've heard about this just recently, which we won't go into here. And therefore this anathema service, this particular anathema service is very important, because those things are mentioned there and put to rest as being wrong, so that no one will adopt them into their own life and be led astray. You have to realise that theology and understanding of the true faith grows as you grow in orthodoxy. And if there is something that you misunderstand, that means that you only have to study and pray more about that to make it clearer in your life. You don't just go ahead and invent something of your own way in order to believe something which may be totally wrong. For example, let me read just one of the verses from the anathema service. This one has to do with the heresy of iconoclasm. What the priests or the bishops will read is something like this. To those who persist in the heresy of denying icons, or rather the apostasy of denying Christ, and who are not counselled by the Mosaic law to be led to their salvation, nor convinced to return to piety by the apostolic teachings, nor induced by patristic exhortations and explanations to abandon their deception, nor persuaded by the agreement of the Church of God throughout the whole world, but who have once and for all joined themselves to portion of the Jews and Greeks for the blasphemous caste of the Jews and Greeks, at the prototype have been shamelessly used by the former to insult through his icon, him who is depicted therein. Therefore, to those who are incorrectly possessed by this deception and have their ears covered towards every divine word and spiritual teaching, since they are already putrefied members, having cut themselves off from the common body of the church, anathema. So that's one verse out of many which anathematizes, cuts off wrong beliefs. It's very important that these sort of services at least perform once a year to bring people up to the correct knowledge of things, especially in our day and age when there's so much flying around in the world, be it in Orthodox sources or not, which do influence people, particularly those who have a weak knowledge of the true theology of the church. Of course, during this Lenten period, we are faced with a lot more prayers and services than what we do during the majority of the year. Even in, say, the Matin services where we normally have 8 verses on a particular day, during the Lenten period we include the 9th one, which is not normally sung during non-Great Lent periods. And prayer, as you know, is the fundamental breathing of the church. What I came across recently about prayer is some clips out in the public about how to pray. I was rather taken aback by this. It was from these 2 monks that were talking, Orthodox apparently. I don't want to judge them because what they said may be pertinent to their own particular lifestyle that they have, but to bring it to the public and announce it like that brings forth some very dangerous spiritual situations. What they were saying is that when you pray very slowly. And when I say very slowly, I mean really slowly. Like if you're saying the Lord's Prayer, you'd be, Our Father, who art in heaven. Things like that, right? Maybe it works for them. But these sort of prayer techniques, which do pop up every now and then, for people of our situation, can be rather negative things in our life. What then is the correct attitude to prayer? What is the right one? Well, in the church you see that how we do the services. There is some chanting, there's some reading, singing, etc. In your private prayers, you too can chant or you can read. The most important thing, by far the most important thing is you concentrate on the words. You wrap like your whole soul around the words that you say. Wrap your soul around it without any imaginings. You don't imagine anything. You know, if it says Christ, well, you don't imagine Christ, or it's about some Mother of God or saints. You don't imagine it. You wrap your mind around it so that you know what it's about, and you leave it at that. And you can read standing up, you know, before your icon corner or whatever, or sitting down, depending on your health, or where you are. But it's very, it can be very dangerous to try and start all these sort of prayer techniques, some of which are even mentioned in the Philokalia, the book of monastic struggles. You have to realise that books like the Philokalia are written by people of great spiritual life, and you can't just adopt what they have done in that respect to yourself, who is hardly even repenting, and expect to get a spiritual benefit. You may think you're getting spiritual benefit, but quite often it is a delusion, something that we call in the church prayer list, a delusional spiritual situation, which may even make you feel good, but it does not lead to a salvific path. Therefore, be very careful when you come across instructions about prayer techniques. You know, how you actually take up physical positions or particular breathing or whatever, or movements in prayer or anything like that. Keep it simple, sinners, is the way to go. Keep it simple. You know, read carefully what's being given by wrapping your self around the words that you were reading and trying not to be distracted. And that distraction is such a big thing, even for priests, you know, serving liturgy. I'll read a part and then I go on to the next one and I just think, did I just read that one or not? It just shows you how the demonic realm and the fallen nature of man acts upon them to pull us away from this concentration and this importance of understanding what we are praying for. It's also very important that we stick to those prayers which have been given to us by the church before we evoke any of our own particular needs. The prayers of the church have indeed been given to us over the centuries and are based on the correct attitude and correct things to pray for in our lives. You don't pray about winning a golf match or something like that, because that's no consequence in your spiritual life. Therefore, do those things which the church has given us. It's rather quite simple. You know, it's being handed to us on a platter. It's there. It's in the books. It's in the service books. Today, it's on public domain everywhere, and there is no excuse not to use that. After that, you can add some of your particular requirements that you may have in your life for whatever reason they might be, whether it's to health or something else or whatever it is, what your requirements are. But be careful with these things when you come across prayer techniques, which are usually something physically based. And what happens is, especially like if you pray like that so slowly, like I just showed you, the mind begins to wander and you even lose track of the idea of that prayer. And before you know it, you're thinking about all sorts of other things other than what it's being put in front of you. You don't have to do any of these special things. Use what the church has given you. Use it wisely and carefully. Understand what you're saying, what you're praying for. And keep away from all these other things which can lead to distraction. Distraction in prayer is one of the biggest things that people face. You know, they start off, they say a couple of words, and before they know it, they're in la la land, thinking about something else altogether. That's what we call the division between the mind, body, and soul that's been shattered to us through the fallen nature. And that's what we're trying to heal, you see. So if you want to know what that problem is, just see that. By praying, you can see your fallen nature coming out very, very clearly. Because if you're reading something, concentrating on something, that's what it should be, and not something else. You're on holiday in Hawaii or something that's coming. Essentially, that's what I wanted to say on this day. Normally, we have a bit of a special service after this where icons are taken up for a procession around the streets and whatever to indicate the restoration of the holy images. They have been given to us from the first days of Christianity as a means for us to not forget our older brothers and sisters, the ones that have made it into the kingdom of heaven. Because they understand spiritual life better than us, and each and every one of them has some unique properties. These we accept in our lives so that we can find some help in our own particular character, in our own particular inclinations. And that's why we have them. We don't have them as idols, obviously. You know, if you see an icon of Mother of God or Christ or St. John there as Archbishop John, we're not looking at them as idols, but rather as those who have made it into the kingdom of heaven and have something to say to us and stand before the throne of God. They stand before the throne of God. Therefore, the intercessors, right? They intercess for us on our behalf. That is pleasing to God because it is the end result of why he became incarnate, to raise man to that level, himself becoming a man forever. So humankind is the most beloved and the most important creation of our Lord. And therefore for us to trample upon that and to disdain human beings is wrong. And therefore even the love your enemies, the most hardest commandment to fulfill, is there for us also, that we don't trample on our enemies, we love them, meaning we do them no harm. God help us in these struggles during Great Lent to increase our prayer life and to increase the concentration in our prayer as the church dictates, and to step away from all of the illusions and distractions and all those things which can pull us away from